InsightAI, powered by InsightJam.
Hey, it's Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I am back with Doug Shannon for another episode of our InsightAI podcast. Doug, welcome.
Hey, yeah, good to be here. Thanks, Doug.
Always a pleasure. When we last spoke, we were talking about agentic AI, which is continuing to become top of mind and blowing up. I put a post out the other day around the number of startups at Y Combinator that are agentic, and it's something along the lines of 37 out of 111 investments are doing something with agentic AI, and the amount of agents that have been invested in and are on the way is overwhelming, and they're all very kind of specific, as you would expect. What are you seeing, and when can we expect them all to arrive? Because it doesn't feel like they've gotten here yet.
I mean, there's a lot of stipulation around that same question that everybody's kind of asking is like, where is it going? Why is it a thing? Where's the value coming out of this? And I think the interesting though is that there's even a new agent, right? Before we had just like, there's agents, there's agentic processes that are agentic, like in nature agents, there's AI agents, there's multi-agent systems, but now there's like Cursor and some of these other like Manus and these agents that are being ran now by these large language models. These foundational models are getting into this, and it's interesting because those are the ones that are running from the foundational models are really harder to trust for the enterprise. And again, like it's like where are they going with this? Because it's great to have an agent that has agency, that can take action, that can do things. And many people are trying to define task-based agents versus goal-based agents, and then the future, what that looks like, or concept understanding agents. You know, there's some future stuff going on there. So it's definitely seen as like the new way to interact.
So Y Combinator has every one of their investments, right? I would consider an elevator pitch, which is literally one sentence of what the business is all about. And so when you search agents in the Y Combinator cohort of investments, these are the agent elevator pitches. Agents that automate enterprise software, agents that find you perfect customers, agents for autonomous influencer marketing, agents to help find in-market companies via deep research, agents for dental operations, agents for accredited clinical trial design, agents for healthcare powered by clinical wearable technology, agents that earn customer dollars when they shop, agents for customer engagement, agent for QI testing, agents for sales operations, agents for recruiting forms, agents to kill Salesforce, agents for audit, agents for regulated industry, agents for revenue intelligence, agents for marketing compliance, agents for life sciences, agents for fraud detection, agents for B2B SaaS finance teams, agents for AP and AR and logistics. On and on and on and on and on. Like very specific. I mean, all these things are not obviously going to work, but agents to replace restaurant managers. I mean,
that's having an AI that tells you how to do your job.
Pretty specific.
Yeah, I think what you see there though is after rattling off the different names of what the businesses are creating. Again, like all of those companies that are just talked about are creating use cases. And is that the future? That's what classical businesses want. They go, give us the use case, give us the need, show us the win, and then we'll go do that thing. We'll put money where that is. The problem is when you have these 30-something different companies that are trying to come out and they're saying, we can handle this use case. We can do this thing. The issue is like, what about the other stuff? Where's the communication? Where's the orchestration? How do I get a restaurant manager to then work with the agent that's the cashier agent to make sure that the cashier is not stealing money or what have you?
Well, so that's a whole nother initiative, which is this idea of the agent name service, the ANS versus the DNS, which we're all familiar with, the domain name service. There is a move afoot to create some sort of secondary, I don't know what you'd call it, pathway
for more.
for agents to just communicate with other agents on a
Right.
on a
It'll be like a telemetry layer or data
in a
link
kind of a
layer.
verifiable layer, right? Similar to DNS. So you have to be registered in the ANS domain area mechanism for AI agents, and they effectively function on their own plane. Because ultimately, how else is it going to work when there are millions of these things wandering around the internet?
I mean, the bonus to creating like an ANS, like a agent, namespace to where it can actually align is that alignment in that space then can make it easier for a marketplace to happen. So if agents end up in a marketplace that many companies right now are working to create, it needs that layer of like normalcy. It's like IEEE comes in and says like, here's how you do USB-C or A, B, and C, right? Here's how we move down that path. There's the innovation layer of that. And as we normalize that, then yeah, I think there's a chance for that.
Well, and so when do they get here? When are they arriving? Am I missing it? I mean, I know there was a lot of announcements over the past week, but when do they start hitting? I mean, I know the
Well,
money keeps going out, and Y Combinator, and they're just one small
yeah.
slice of the venture money, but there's lots of venture money out there. When does the thing arrive? When do they start hitting?
In the first place is, again, we're going to see these hit is personalized. So you have like personalized agents that people are using now to either help them on social media or help them to get out there and do something or blog posting, whatever it is. Some people are using to write books for whatever reason. And
Are you using any agents at this point?
no, I have some that like basically just like look up stuff for me. But in general, the most of the stuff I use is going to be like a highly fine-tuned model of what I can use to help me like get through stuff or make things easier for myself. To
What's
act
your
more like
LLM of choice these days?
it depends. So right, so different LLMs, different foundational models have different wins, right? So if I'm looking up like medical information, if I have a question, I'll usually use like Claude. If I'm doing conversational understandings or looking at something from a very communicative like way, like to communicate to it, it's 4.0, right? Or to create pictures and whatnot, just the quick pictures of like what I'm working on, especially like on LinkedIn and whatnot. Like those pictures are usually through LLMs and whatnot to just make it easier because it's much easier to create a picture on there to say like, this is what I'm trying to convey versus like
Is that
hand
Sora?
generate
Are you
it.
using Sora for that?
No, Sora's more for like video, right? So mainly it's like 4.0, and if I can't get it through 4.0, if I'm doing like a like an infograph or something, like Claude has some cool abilities there to at least get it the gist out, and then you have to go like scale it up and take a look at it in other ways. So, but again, to your point, where agents are going, when are they coming? Now, your small to medium sized businesses, again, like are highly enabled, but they just don't understand it enough yet to trust it. Some small businesses are definitely talking to them, communicating to them, getting ideas for new markets that they can jump into. Medium sized businesses can definitely take on things, but they don't understand enough that they don't feel like they can control it. So they need, again, and they're looking for use cases like, how do I sell my stuff? How do I do a POC on a payments, reconciliation, or how do I handle my receipts and stuff like that so I can handle my taxes better? Like this is what those companies are looking for. But when it comes into enterprise, like me being an enterprise practitioner, the hard part is you can't use these LLM agents. You can't use, just a use case agent, because then you go and you're like, okay, I bought that one use case that did that thing. 3 to 6 months down the line, you're like, oh, I need another one to do a different thing, or I need this to communicate to this other thing. And you're like, well, they didn't build that in. You bought the use case. And this is why I said use cases, just that the premise needs to kind of just stop. Companies should be looking at where they jump into an area and say, we're going to look at HR, we're going to look at IT, just jump in and then say, now that we're here, what can we do? Like, what are the things? And start just feeling it out, getting your BAs, your business analysts, driving through there, understanding like where the pain points are, finding those ways to connect. Because as you kind of land and expand, and as you kind of like iterate on those different wins in those areas, you're going to find those use cases. You're going to find those things that really matter. Because what happens is if you just find a use case, it matters then. But the same thing happens with automation. It may not matter 6 months from now. It may not matter a year from now. Or you may be automating or doing Gen AI or building an agent on something that at the end of the day, you should have just asked the question first of, why are we doing this in the first place? Maybe we don't need to do that. And so definitely validate your stuff. And that's why there's a mixed bag. Like everybody's like, it's happening, but it's not happening, but it's here. So let's go drive it. But how do we do it? And so there's a lot of and that's where the hype comes in, right? People are like, oh, but there's 30 something companies that are coming out. There's already 100 companies that are already out there. And then out of those companies, it's who's doing it right, who is building agent to agent orchestration, who is
Well,
building
so
ways.
when I see these investments, I mean, agents for dental operation, agents for recruiting firms, agents for QA testing, are these not just a faux naming, a faux description, but they're actually, this is more a full blown solution,
So
and we're using agent as I mean, these companies are using agent in a kind of I mean, I don't understand how this is going to come to market.
yeah, I usually try to take the higher road, and so being nice and saying, okay, they're not just wrapper companies. They're not just like doing something because like there's money in it. The higher road here is saying, a dental hygienist agent, right? There are massive wins when it comes into iterating a certain area. So maybe they had a customer and they say, hey, look, we can do agents. Let's go build a thing together. And then they can go resell that thing, right? Or they say, hey, here's this functional thing that we can do. We've been able to identify cavities through x-rays, and now we can identify other things through x-rays, or gum disease or gingivitis. And so as that kind of grows out, that kind of iterative like growth of a use case that turns into a use case, because it shows value in that. But they weren't able to do that potentially until they actually tested it. And this is where it goes back into companies, no matter what size you are, should be experimenting, should be saying, how do I do this? Get in with some kind of vendor that doesn't look like they're going to vendor lock you in, or keep it to where you can't grow, or change vendors if you need to, or just continue to like build out. That's what you have to do. And you're going to have to build a little bit of trust, and you're going to have to vet these people out, and you're going to have to like put some money in to say, let's go build the thing. And then until you do, you're not going to move. And there is no waiting, and there is no like wait for Microsoft to give you the answer, or wait for the foundational models to build you agents to give you the answer. Because if you give more information to those foundational models, you've lost. They're going to steal it all. You're going to be commoditized.
So what do you build it on?
So there's many different foundational groups.
Like if you
right?
build it, you're sharing your data effectively. I mean, there's no way around that.
In most cases, yes. However, this is the other draw to agents. So agents have the ability to be that scaffolding, to be the scaffolding around the building. So if the building itself is a foundational model, and this is, I guess, let's roll that back, because like people need to understand, there's still companies out there for whatever reason saying we're going to go build our own LLMs. Those companies are incorrect. They need to stop.
Yeah, I don't know why you do that.
Yeah, if they want to put the money in it, go for it, but you're going to be wasting your money, millions upon millions of dollars. Use the foundational models, although agents are where that helps. It bridges the gap. It's literally the scaffolding that bridges the gap, or the ravine. I mean,
is this the same paradigm as like a private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud concept, where you can have a private?
Yeah, you have private agents, but you're connecting to a cloud foundational model, right? So as you do,
but the agreement would be that you don't get my data.
Right. And in some cases, that's where Microsoft comes in, and even Google's come in on that too, and saying, look, even though you're connecting through us to connect to our LLMs as a business, we're not going to take your data. But again, like your agents are going to be driving that conversation and not allowing certain things to go out. Or you can build in normalized speech patterns. So when you type something into an agent, it can actually go grab and say, wait, there's some PII in there, like personal identification information in there. And then it can then clean that up and then feed that to like the API call to the foundational model or what have you. So there's ways to protect yourselves. And again, like especially enterprises that have been known to be good at what they're good at, the services that they provide, the product that they put out, the things that they manufacture, you don't want your IP, your intellectual property, going out and being commoditized. Like that information should be private to you, and you're going to utilize agents to build those walls to ensure that it doesn't get out.
So is that how you see it going? That I mean, because you're right. I mean, if you think you're going to lose your corporate
identity,
data,
right,
then you obviously can't. You can't, just from a practical business perspective, you can't use a large language model. But if you can't use a large language model, then how do you propose? How do these companies propose making any money if you have that kind of in the background that your data isn't going to necessarily be? I mean, that can't possibly be part of the sales pitch.
That's where I use the term of intellectual surrender, right? If you're just going to allow your data to go out and you're going to allow,
companies have got to. I mean, the solution providers have got to have an answer to that. They're not going to bring solutions to the party that say, yeah, the only drawback is that all your data gets sucked into the large language model we built our agent on.
Right. And
There's no
that's
way
the
that
big,
nobody will go
yeah,
for that in
yeah, the
either
big
direction, the
problem
solution
is,
providers or so it strikes me that, I mean, it's almost like it's like you're just using the large language model or whatever the service is as if
yeah,
you
you're
were
going to use it for
using
the data that it
bandwidth.
has.
It's just,
Yeah.
you're just paying tokens for access to the processing power and
Right.
the
That's what you should be doing. Yeah. And although like, again, like Microsoft does do some protections there, Google does protections there, even some of the open source like Llama has some ingestion points where you can kind of protect that data, but you have to watch that telemetry and make sure and this is why when we watch out for new models that come out, like the DeepSeek that we've talked about before, is like, you got to watch what's the telemetry look like? What does it look like when you download the new version? What is going in? What is going out? How do you protect yourself? And so this is why people and companies fall back on the Microsofts and the Googles and the Amazons to say, you be that middle ground to help protect. And then we'll work on this side. But again, like as things get bigger, better, and have more connections, and as these agents reach out to different things, or when these agents start talking to other agents. So if you have an agent inside of your enterprise or your company that does certain function and features, and it connects to another agent, say like at Salesforce or ServiceNow or H&R Block, right? You want to make sure it's not providing too much data out. And you may not know what that looks like. So you need another provider or a partner or a company, like a vendor that you work with that has that knowledge. And that goes into the knowledge gap that's happening right now, is people say, we need people to understand this stuff. And there's not enough people out there that do understand it from the enterprise side. And then you go look for those people and you try to find them. And you find out that all the vendors like Accenture and KPMG and all these people have actually hired them on. And so you're like, where are the people? Oh, I have to go work with these vendors to actually go handle this.
Well, so while we're wrapping up this segment, I'm curious about this idea that, and I don't know if this is true or not. I can't tell anymore what happens and what doesn't happen. Everybody tells you one thing, and then it turns out it isn't necessarily the one thing. But the story goes that the U.S. Copyright Office, head of the U.S. Copyright Office, came out a couple of weeks ago and said that AI models were effectively breaching copyright with AI. The AI models were breaching copyright. That sometimes they breach copyright, which, I mean, this isn't news, right? We can all see it, obviously, and there's all kinds of lawsuits afoot around that sort of thing. But then the next day, as the story goes, and again, I don't know whether this is true or not. I haven't heard this person actually say this out loud, but the next day this person was fired. And if that's the case, it would indicate to me that copyright, that obviously there's a feeling that any hindrance with regard to AI at this point is going to create a competitive disadvantage for nation states. And as a result, all bets are off with regard to traditional protections against.
I mean, that's the push, right? Is and we can see it in the news, and we can see it in how the leaders of these foundational models are pushing this, right? And they're very much saying, stay out of the way, don't regulate it, and then they always give like the warning, like, don't do it what Europe's doing. I was like, Europe actually kind of did it really well considering what LinkedIn did. Like LinkedIn says, like, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to mine everybody's data. And so everybody kind of freaks out and says, hey, that's not cool. We should be able to choose what we do. Well, Europe already had it turned off. Like it doesn't mine any of Europe's data, which is kind of fantastic. And then here in the United States, we had to actually hit a toggle button to turn it off.
Well, is it kind of fantastic, or are they just going to be left in the dust because they're no longer competitive?
I mean, that's been said in the news a lot lately. They're doing better. It's just a matter of like what happens with a lot of legislation.
Again, it is an arms race at this point. I mean, the idea that if you go back in time and say after World War II, well, we're just not gonna build nuclear weapons despite the fact that we can, because we don't believe in them in the long term. Well, that's lovely. It's a lovely sentiment.
Maybe it should have been.
But then what? Then you're completely overpowered, and I mean, one would argue vulnerable to domination.
Well, I mean, that same thing, that same logic, right, is happening in the large language world because, and the reason behind that is AGI, right? Artificial general intelligence, where everybody's kind of moving into is AGI. And when AGI hits, everybody is basically agreeing that whoever gets there first, be it Google, be it OpenAI, be it Anthropic, they win because you won't be able to stop it. And you won't even know when it happens.
But it's just similar to nuclear weapons, right? So somebody will
is.
be first,
Right.
but that won't mean that everybody's last. It'll mean they're just next. And
Well, I mean,
eventually
the thing
everybody
is-
will have it. And once everybody has it, we're back to, mutually assured destruction where it's
It is because walls will be built because the thing is, if once somebody hits AGI, that AGI thing is going to block everyone else from hitting it. That's going to be its goal. It's kind of
Is
crazy.
that what you
but
think? Is that how you see
that-
it going?
that's what's been said by many of the leaders out there. And so,
Well, so
when
then
it
I mean,
blocks-
that sounds like a national security issue then. So why
Right.
wouldn't you just
which then moves into how do you defend against that, right? How does that then work for
Well,
nation state and country?
how does any private corporation get to keep that power? They don't.
Well, that's
It's like
I
the
would be
idea that the Boeing Corporation could invent, or whoever, McDonald, I don't know who are the bomb makers of the world. Whoever invents the atomic bomb as a private entity. The idea that we invented it, so we have the ability. That won't be how this goes down. AGI can't be left in the
it shouldn't
the hands of a private entity.
right because then the other
There's-
it does spur into the conversation of like if and when or if that does happen, then what do countries do? And that 100% spurs AI sovereignty or sovereign AI to where then countries have to say, no, we have our own thing. You stay out because we can't trust what AGI would do potentially because nobody really knows it. It's not here yet, right? So as far as we know, because we won't know
so
when
is
it
that,
does.
this is basically this is the race. This is why the Copyright
This is the race.
Office needs to be, muzzled because
The-
anything that
race
gets
is-
in the way of a
yeah.
race to AGI right now is a hindrance to the nation states attempting to achieve the ultimate intelligence. And so if you throttle it, you give the other countries the advantage.
Maybe that's why that person was fired. I mean, who knows why? I mean, we can just speculate. But in general, countries have taken a blind eye to this in a way because they want to win. They want to be the country that says
Of
we're
course.
brought
Of
this
course.
in. It's a space race again.
Figure it out later.
Yeah,
But you
it's literally a
can't- you
space race.
can't-
So,
Yeah, no, I get it. I understand it. And truth of the matter is that as much as I think some of our copywritten content at Solutions Review has been ingested willy nilly, we see it popping up all the time, and we have clients contacting us talking about how they saw a piece in a result that they received, and they were
verbatim.
Yeah, no, I mean, I personally, I get it. I don't think about it for 1 second that it's out of bounds. I get what they're doing, and I think
how do you
we'll all just
circumvent?
deal with it.
Yeah, and that's something that we talk about in the next segment. But it's like how do you circumvent this? How do you prevent this? What does authentication look like? What does identity look like? So.
Well, let's take a break, and we'll get back after those types of topics in just a second.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, Next Thing.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads. And contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
All right, Doug. Let's talk about where we're going, and I want to tip a hat to the Google I/O Day the other day, where they had a lot of things that we should talk about, a lot of things that they announced that we should talk about that cross into all kinds of areas of what we were just talking about in terms of human impact and copyright, but also their token usage monthly last year at this time, they processed 9.7 trillion. This is just Google. Processed 9.7 trillion tokens a month in April. And this April, they processed 480 trillion tokens in a month, which is 50x, which is the hockey stick, I guess this way, the hockey stick of usage. It seems to me like it is on like Donkey Kong right now.
Well, I mean, you have to take into account that during that time frame, right before, so that was the 9 trillion when they were just doing like Gemini, early Gemini and stuff like that. But then when they actually involved their model into Google search. And so now when you Google search, you get like that other side model there that actually gives you AI search as well. It gives you like a little bit of insight of what you're asking for. That's where a lot of that's probably coming from.
Of
But
course.
it's great because they have to fix it because Google search is basically dead by most cases because most people are using AI to search anyway. And so by not bridging the two, it's not smart.
This is a devastation, that a very subtle devastation of a very humongous business model of search engine optimization and click marketing. The idea that now it is zero click. There's this term called zero click, where you go to Google, and where in the past you would search for a term and you would click out.
Yep.
On, page one was what the coin of the realm was. Get to page one and you will get all the click traffic. But now there's zero click. And I think I don't know what the percentage is, but it's shockingly high, the zero click percentage, which means people are getting the answer on the page. They're not clicking anywhere. They typed in to get something and Google's given the answer before anybody got paid for a click, or before anybody's paying them for a click.
Yeah, the click-through rate, where that goes, and this is where SEO becomes a thing, right? People pay for SEO. People pay to be on that first page. Why? Why are they paying for that? And how is AI going
clicks
to drive
now are becoming less and less, which means the cost per click is becoming more and more, and the whole thing's going to crater because the traffic isn't big enough, the cost is too much. The whole model is heading toward catastrophe, and it's no small amount of Google's income. And Google has decided to just skate right on through. I mean, it's not talking about, this whole experiment is only going to get more complete. They're going to give up on click.
They will potentially, right? But like, why? If a company makes a lot of money on a certain thing, right? Say that's their product, right? They're not just going to walk away from it unless they have another idea behind it. And the idea behind it is they're trying to find out how to get AI search to say it in a certain way to put people back into pay attention to this. Or, hey, this is what you're looking for. And that first thing that comes up was paid for by a company or sponsorship or whatnot. They're trying to find out how to build that through. So they may look like they're skating through. That doesn't mean that they don't have an answer to that. And what the future where they have Project Jarvis coming, and they're looking at giving a personalized system, LLM, their own like small language model, foundational kind of like light model into the hands of users, and then commoditizing that user's information, but still giving them a lot of value back to themselves. Maybe that's how.
Well, maybe it is. I mean, I think they're bringing a lot of things to the party right now. They just had this I/O event, and it was amazing what they're doing. Not the least of which is changing the way video conferencing works. I don't know if you saw this Google video conferencing, which creates a 3D representation of the person on the other side. It's called
Google
Beam. Google Beam.
Oh, yeah,
so Google Beam, which was a project called Starline, is now a 3D experience. So larger screen, obviously, but by using AI, you can create this person dimensionally on the other side in a way that tricks your brain into believing that they're genuinely in the room with you.
That has shadow and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's interesting because like we're trying to bridge the gap, right? Like social media did its thing, AI is doing its thing. It's 100x, if not 500x better at so many things. And we're trying to mimic humans again. We're trying to find ways to bring humans in to make it feel human. But when we're using synthetic data to build some of these new interactions, isn't that not going to be human? Like when you have synthetic data building on synthetic things to build the best possible route without the humans aren't always like we carve cow paths, we do it our way, we go shortest that we think, we'll walk through the grass, that kind of thing, just to make a new path that's faster for us. AI doesn't do that. Computers don't do that. Synthetic life forms don't do that. So are we creating a world that we're going to recognize, or are we going to continue to try to bridge that gap and hope it works?
See, my take on that was that this is how education gets disrupted. That now you have this very realistic recreation of a teacher or a professor or a tutor that is right in front of you, dimensionally represented, that can now deliver you education at the rate that you can absorb it, so that the kid who is smart and motivated and doesn't want to wait around for the rest of the class
Just
to
knock
catch
them.
up doesn't have to. They can go as fast as they want now. And there's no cost because this synthetic representation of the teacher, it can be replicated for each student.
Yeah.
And they can help the students that are going slower. And you're no longer throttled by the cohort. And so the smart kids aren't sitting there bored to tears and their desk scribbling on their
drawing pictures.
Yeah.
There's a chance of that. I mean, we are seeing schools being.
I don't think there's any question that I mean, to me, that's how it reduces the cost of education delivery to next to nothing. But B, it isn't you aren't forcing you aren't measuring learning in 180 days a year, regardless of whether you need them or not. It's no longer this. Well, you're all going to have to sit there all day long, 180 days. And when there are snow days, you're going to have to stay another however many snow days there were.
Yeah.
All that's gone. It's like you're all on your own adventure at this point. And so the kids, quite frankly, that aren't able to keep up are given better attention than shunted off to the side. And
right. So when we talk about stuff like that, the most thing that people are watching this are like, oh, but are they getting rid of teachers' jobs then? And I think the answer is no. I think to your point, though, is that
well, I think that might be your answer.
Oh, okay.
My answer would be see you later. My answer is they're definitely gone. They're absolutely gone. Why do you need it? Why do you need a teacher who has absolutely complete? I mean, from classroom to classroom, you have a complete bell curve of quality. I mean, teachers absolutely go away, whether we like it or not is a debate to have. But the idea that education is being served evenly and at the highest level of quality by the human delivery mechanism that we currently employ, I don't think there's any question we can do better than that.
Right, but what is that? So if we were to solution this, right? If we were to talk about it, so you have agents that are sitting on end user systems, meaning like kids' Chromebooks, for example. And those agents are watching what the kids are doing. They're helping to interact. They're seeing like how fast they're typing, what they're doing. Are they understanding? They're working with an avatar teacher that is basically delivering the main curriculum that has been decided on by the school system or that area or that region or that kind of.
Again, I argue that a kid in the 6th grade right now, right, has 6 more years left before they graduate from high school. And in 6 years' time, what do you think this is going to look like? AI is going to look like in 6 years' time. By the time that kid is graduating from high school, we're going to be 6 years further down the road. It's going to look like, and how is a town school committee run by part-time elected committee members going to try to keep up? Like, there's no way they can keep up. At some point, a private entity is going to come in and just, I mean, again, it's like school, what is it? The homeschooling. I mean, at some point, private entities are going to come in and say, look, your kid should not be sitting in classrooms
Yeah.
being
That's a good
being
point
given
there.
the mediocre gruel of like the lowest common denominator education because
Right.
you can do better than that for next to nothing.
Well, I think you just like opened up a whole can of like something interesting because like ISDs and just independent school districts don't do well enough, and they're not going to be able to do this at scale. But a community of private entities that work together, like charter schools that do a thing, think like Kaiser Permanente, for example, in healthcare. If they corporatize it, if they do it in the right way, they get alignment, make sure that they're teaching the right thing and doing it in an agent way, but also keeping teachers on staff to handle the nuance of learning and whatnot that happens, or to be there as like assistants to help a student when they're having issues or learning disabilities or what have you. That's a darn good path.
I can't believe that education is going to. I think it's naive for us to believe that education is not going to be fundamentally affected by
It has to
what we're
it has to
seeing
be
right
because
now. That
we're
it-
not even teaching the right stuff in school now, right?
well,
Kids coming out of college,
kids are
and they're not able to be,
like smart kids
functional.
don't need to sit in class 180 days for 12 years. They just don't. If they
They
want
don't.
to, they're chomping at the. I mean, and quite frankly, I would argue that education needs to diversify in order to find each kid's
Path or
yeah
dial.
right passion, whatever it
Yeah.
is, and then start to just like any kids decide they want to take shop class, or kids decide they want to go and take some of these other specialty, go to the computer science lab or whatever. And that's kind of the only options they have, is this kind of like broader kind of diversity. But truth of the matter is that this thing could be so specifically tailored to each kid that the
It
quality of
could be.
education per
Yeah.
child will be light years better than anything they get right now.
Well, there's a chance that we actually get to bring back some of those shop classes that we've gotten rid of. Like we may have the time, we may find that streamlined approach of like, let's bring stuff back in. And even those classes may be avatared out or whatnot, to where you have somebody, because like if you look at the latest Google trends, one of the most common things that's being asked right now of Google is people are asking, how do I use a hammer? And that stuff we've all learned from our dads, and like, or even our moms, right? Like that is something innate to know, like how to use tools. And that's a common question being asked, that there's a concern. And so shop classes are key. I mean, I learned how to build my own hammer back in shop class. So like there's amazing things to be learned there. And I think that could give us that, like, education is going to change. And I think agents are going to be a big proponent of that. And I mean, what if you had that agent with that child that lived, that stayed with them throughout their life? That's the key for, like, that's the direction we're kind of moving towards. We just
It'll be
haven't
the
seen
parents. It'll
like
be
that.
the parents that have
It'll be like
access
the
to this
nanny we never
wild
had.
technology at work, and they'll be very quickly realizing, why am I not leveraging this wild technology, this incredible power for my kid who watches me on my screens, or is asking me how I'm getting all this done with these agents, and wondering how they can get the same thing. And the parents will soon realize that the current state of education is archaic, and it will not survive what this is capable of delivering. Because in the end, the only advantage that academia has ever had, two advantages. One was the knowledge base, right? We know more than you do.
Yeah,
So we're going to be able to teach your kid things that you can't teach your kid, and nobody else can teach your kid. And this is the only way to get it. Second is, we have these carbon-based life forms that are super trained to deliver this knowledge that only we have, and have the patience to deliver. But that's all gone. Neither of those advantages will exist. The first advantage that's gone is the knowledge base. That's long gone.
Yeah, you don't have to wait for the next version of the book, right? Like it's already there. So
And now once you get these things like Google Beam, and I think this is just an interesting kind of, I when I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's interesting. They've figured out how to deliver the human experience virtually in a 3-dimensional entity that tricks your brain into thinking there's a person across from me, so I'm having a different level of engagement.
Yeah, I mean, even the human side of that, that reminds me of something I learned, many years ago of when people are in virtual reality, you put the goggles on and whatnot, and you're in virtual reality. They found out that when you don't have your avatar, like every human can see their nose. Like when you're just like looking, you see your nose. Like you put an eye closed or whatever. But when you're in VR, there was no nose. There was no like silhouette. And so as soon as they found out, they're like, people are getting sick by just playing these games. Why? And then they put like this little bit of like something there, and all of a sudden now you have spatial awareness and balance, and they're like, we didn't know. And I think that's exactly what we're going to be learning with agents, and that this future we're building is we're going to start learning more about the human body, the human dilemma, the human experience that we've never really thought of, but we're going to have to look at it, and we're really not looking at it now. So it's gonna be interesting.
No, this is what excites me about it. I mean, I'm scared to death of a bunch of it in terms of its ability to kind of wipe out what I inevitably, I believe, will wipe out massive swaths of the workforce. But I'm also excited about it in that it will
change.
It will be changing the way people come up to speed in the world. I think it'll change foundationally all kinds of institutions, and I like the idea that we're going through a full blown revolution, and everything's going to be on the table.
It's going to have to be. And again, like the many conversations I have with many leaders and just the different councils and events that I go to, it's becoming a very, very human conversation. The more we talk about technology, the more we talk about humanity. The more we talk about, like we talked about here, like brave spaces, we talked about like how to handle people differently, the emotional impact of that. Where are we going? Again, like we're still trying to answer that question. Like, what does it mean to be human? And we're going to find out, I guess, because AI is going to help us figure that out, because it's going to watch us like crazy. And we're going to know, well, what does it mean? And we may get to understand that question better.
All right, let's take a break and we'll wrap this up with a few more things that get me riled up.
Want more Insight Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
All right, Doug. One implication to all this massive compute is the inevitable requirement for power, and I believe, well, I'm pretty sure that at least where we live in the United States, that there just isn't enough. I thought I saw the number that there needs to be something along the lines of 90, whatever they are, something, whatever the biggest, I should know
gigawatts.
So it's the equivalent of 90 nuclear power plants that need to be built, and obviously we're not capable of building all that power anytime soon. And so what you're seeing, and I thought it was interesting in this trip that the president just had in the Middle East, tagging along was Sam Altman in the background, because the last visit was to the United Arab Emirates, where OpenAI is building a massive AI center in Abu Dhabi. And two things came to mind in seeing that. One is, why are they building a massive AI center in Abu Dhabi? And two, it's got to be more than just the money. And I think what it is access to power, like physical raw energy, that there's no stone being left unturned to build more power grid than in the Middle East right now.
There's a chance. I would almost even say they did it because it's a way to diversify. It's, the United Arab Emirates, that country, that kingdom is looking to say, we've made a bunch of money on oil. We have oil money. What is the other commodity we can do? So like, we need to invent something. We need to drive something. What does that look like? And they want to get into the AI game. They want to say, like, we want the smartest, the brightest people here. And what if the United States says we're going to put more restraint on things? Well, if OpenAI and some of these companies end up diversifying and putting things out there, maybe they build it out there and there's no holdback, right? They can do whatever they want, right? So there's some wins there on that side. Then there could be a power aspect there. You have like the smart cities that are being built out there, like the giant one line city that's like nuts, but
Yes.
that can be ran by AI and all these other features that are in that. And that's kind of corporately owned in a way too, in many cases. So that's the future of that. It's going to be very interesting how that goes.
Well, so what's the situation here? I know that China is investing in massive power projects. They just brought one online that is colossal. They're also building and innovating with regard to nuclear power. And the United States is obviously seems to be almost going in reverse with regard to bringing coal back up to speed. And I don't know whether or not we'll ever be able to get over our head trash around nuclear. This seems like a pretty significant bottleneck that is going to be needed to be dealt with.
There's actually some big changes actually coming, and they're already here in a lot of ways. It's just the mass majority don't understand what it is yet. So let me explain it. So I was just at an AI infrastructure conference here in the Silicon Valley, Bay Area, Menlo Park and whatnot, and talking to many of these companies that are actually driving this power. So yes, it takes 15 to 25 years still to put a nuclear power plant in play. That's time we don't have, right? We can start them. We've already, companies and people have already started them. But it's where do you have that other energy that you can tap into while you're waiting to play catch up? And what we're seeing is there are coal plants, and coal is way cleaner than it ever used to be. The particulates are all captured. It just turns into steam. It's no big deal anymore. The green, items that come out of like the green energy and whatnot, and the carbon footprint, all that stuff is like much lower, if not non-existent. Then we have the fact that like there are companies, certain particular companies I was talking to, that they're stating like they're doing hydrogen, and they're doing hydrogen in a way that the output of it is carbon in the form of carbon, items and nanotubes and carbon particles. And so like, not only do you have hydrogen that is a fantastic power source, you have the burn off or the excess or like the trash is actually usable into other things. That carbon that comes out of there could be built to create, again, like carbon networks that actually build filtration for, say, salt water, to take the salt out of the salt water to make it fresh water. So, and those are some of the things. And then again, like we need power for that too, because that's another power struggle that we have besides that. And besides the fact that you have like, Bitcoin mining and whatnot, taking up 3% of the entire power of the United States right now. So that's a huge power suck in the system. So yes, power is definitely going to be the conversation, but let's like spur that another way. So that's the power conversation, right? And that's the input output. And there's interesting stuff there. And there's companies building this, some fantastic stuff. Yet, how do we also keep up, and how do we make these, we mentioned in the earlier segment of like Google using 480 trillion different tokens. Fine. How do we fix that? We're going to be asking more of these foundational models. We're going to be driving that up. So how do we use less tokens? How do we use less power? Because of less tokens, less power. And so with the other thing about AI infrastructure that's coming out is that companies are taking these RAG models and building inferencing onto them. And inferencing is understanding, hey, we understand and we talk about the same thing all the time. We ask like, hey, this business, this function, this item, the fact that like when Sam Altman was saying, stop saying thank you to these large language models because it's causing our numbers to go up. Well, that's inferencing. That question is actually nebulous. Like his answer to that was incorrect. The fact of it is like, thank you could be commoditized or tokenized to where it's inference to understand it's just always implied, which is actually kind of nice, because if we always implied thank you to the AI, maybe it'll be nicer to us in the future.
Well, so it seems like everything's on the table, including where we're going to access or how we're going to access all this AI power. I know that there was this kind of cryptic announcement from OpenAI recently about how they've acquired this company that was founded by a guy named Johnny Ive, who is the former head of product design at Apple, created the iMac, the G3, the iPod, and the iPhone. Knows a thing or two, obviously, about interface. And the company that he had started was acquired by OpenAI for over $6 billion without a product to its name. Obviously, they've created something, and the scuttlebutt is that it's a new type of interface for engaging AI for tasks, I guess. What are your thoughts on this? What do you think is afoot? What is it that you're hearing?
Well, I think the biggest thing, we heard this from Google, we heard this from many other companies, like IO and IoT is coming, and it's going to be huge. There's telemetry, there's understanding, there's data, and it's how you ingest that data. And some of the things that we, as we know about foundational large language models, and they're turning into these world models, they need more human data, because right now they've turned to synthetic data to kind of build that out, and synthetic data has its limitations. But how do you get more human data? You build devices that humans wear on them, like wearable devices. So, Meta's already had glasses that they're talking about ingesting this data, and you're walking around and it's working with the world around you. Well, Google just announced that at their event too. Well, why wouldn't OpenAI want to get on that? Because they just recently made deals with Oxford University and taking all those libraries and stuff like that. Why wouldn't they then go, well, what if we enabled all the people and all the students and all the individuals that we're having these conversations with to have these cameras on your eyes or on your device, like it's recording messages, it's recording information that's happening around your life. So then, as OpenAI has already shown, like they're looking at the history of all your chats, the understanding of all your memory. Well, what if you take all your other memories, your visual memory, the talking that you do to your friends, the notes that you take, how can it just make you better or help you thrive or help you do more things? Maybe you realize you forgot to say thank you the last time your friend bought you dinner, or you took somebody out for a cup of coffee or something. It's those little interactions. They're trying to build that back in, because as we go through, as we saw with social media, as we go through to AI, we're seeing that we're still very divided. There's still massive, like families are divided, friends are divided. People don't make friends very easy anymore. But what if we found a way to say, hey, there are similarities here. Maybe you want to meet other people. Maybe we find a way to build those connections because they matter. Because as humans, we are highly collaborative. We are highly community-based. And right now, we're probably the less community-based we've ever been as a society and as a whole unit that lives on this earth. How do we fix that? And I think they're trying to find a way to get the human back into it.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it feels a lot like it's going to be, while everything has been touch and type and click and scroll and swipe.
It's like the Bop It, the Bop It toy, like Bop It, twist it. Yeah.
It feels like this is headed toward voice. That would be my guess.
Voice, visual. If I'm looking at it, I'm talking to that thing, right? If there's an IoT device in my area, I can look at it and then give it a message or talk to it, kind of like with the Echoes and the Alexas and stuff like that. I can't say that too loud because it might actually pick up. So in general, you want to build that. That's how that's going to kind of work. Like spatial, IoT, all these things are coming, and it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's more than a little interesting. I'll tell you what, this moment in time is I don't think people truly appreciate where we are. It just feels to me like, as I was saying earlier, everything is on the table, that nothing is sacred, that institutions that have existed forever in our experience, and relatively, actually, when you look at the history of humankind, our modern institutions are relatively young. But in perspective to the lifespan of a Homo sapien, they've been around for a long time. And again, I think everything is up for grabs, and it's going to happen gradually, and then, as somebody said, it'll happen all at once.
Yes. it'll happen and we won't even know what happened. That's the crazy part is like things are going to happen and it's only after it's happened that we go, whoa, what just happened? And there's people still now that I talk to in daily life and they don't use AI. They refuse to use AI. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, just talk to it. Do something. And again, like humans are, we're very stubborn at times and that's just the way we are. But to understand the thing about like where we're at versus where we've come from is like, it's literally 2 lifetimes in the last 200 years. Everything that we touch, everything around us right now has been invented and it's been built on top of one another. And so one of the things I was talking about is like, we always kind of complain about the previous generation or the new generation, like, oh, they got it so easy. And man, they don't know. And they're timid or they're this or whatever we want to call them. Yet that's the goal. Every human out there, the goal is to make it easier for them. The goal is to like, it was harder for our grandparents. Like, being human is hard. Being human in the world of, the animal kingdom, everything else is hard. Our job is to make it easier. And their job is to take it and run with that torch the next time. And it's going to be easier for that future generation. But with AI, we're seeing that it's fast and we have to be nimble and we have to experiment and we have to be okay with failure because that's the only way we're going to learn. And we're going to have to just fail forward and move through this. And that's kind of the takeaway I think people should really look at.
Well, and be sensitive to the fact that we all need to evolve with it. If we intend to live with it, we can't remain, stuck in our old mindset, on our old ways, or we will, in the end, be displaced ourselves. So it's an amazing thing.
If we don't stand up and talk to it, then those that actually make a difference, like, let's make a difference. If you're not going to, then be okay with what happens afterwards.
Yeah, no, it's going to be an amazing time, and we will continue to look at it each week with you, or each month, I guess.
Bi-weekly.
At this point,
we try
every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We'll try to speed things along there. But yeah, thanks again for the time, Doug. Always a pleasure to see you. We'll look forward to doing this again shortly, and in the end, keep getting out there to the conferences and seeing what's what. And we'll again always have plenty to talk about. So thanks.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it.
Powered by Insight Jam.